everyone, now this video is very simple. I'm just gonna list all the 100 books I've read so far this year. Let's hope I read 100 more. I'm not sure that's gonna happen, but let's do it. First book I read this year was The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. I gave it 3 stars, I think. Next book I read was My Heart and Other Black Holes by Jasmine Morga. I gave this 4.5 stars. Then I read Wires and Nerve by Marissa Meyer. I think I gave it 3 stars. Then I read The Sea Dragon Society. I gave that 4 stars. Then I read The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue. I gave that 3.5 stars. Then I read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet and I DNF'd and I gave it 2 stars. I read then Crown of Midnight by Sarah J Maas and I gave that 5 stars. Then I read The Guest List and I gave that 3 stars. I read The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I gave that 3.5 stars. I read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie and I gave that 5 stars. Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. I gave this 3 stars, I think. Then I read A Frame of Life by Daniele Pioli and I gave that 5 stars. Downstream by Daniele Pioli, 5 stars. And Then I Tried to Be Funny by Daniele Pioli, 5 stars. I read A Pocket Full of Rye by Agatha Christie and I gave this 4 stars. I read Murder in Mesopotamia by Agatha Christie and I gave this 2.5 stars. I read The Death of Mrs. Westaway and I think it was one of the by Ruth Ware. I think it was one of the worst thrillers I have read in my whole life. I gave that 2.5 stars. Then I read Devil in Spring and I DNF'd and I gave it 2 stars by Lisa Kleypas. Then I reread Secrets for the Mad by Dodie and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read The Midnight Library and I was kind of disappointed. I gave it 3 stars. Then I read The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J Maas and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read Heartstopper Volume 1 and I gave it 4 stars. I read this little tiny book that's kind of pointless. Jane Austen, her complete novels in one sitting. It's just like synopsis of her novels and I gave it 3 stars. Then I read How to Stop Time by Matt Haig and I gave this 5 stars. Then I read All My Friends Are Dead and I gave that 3 stars. Then I read As Três Marias de Raquel de Queiroz and I gave this 5 stars. I read the selected poems of John Keats and I gave it 3.5 stars, mostly because it went over my head and I felt too stupid. Then I read Entangle Mix 3 by Justin Richardson and I gave that 4 stars. I read The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang and I fell in love. It's so cute. I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I read The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton and I DNF'd in like 80%. I just couldn't take it anymore. I gave it 3 stars. 2.5 I think. Then I read The Selected Poetry of Rainer Maria Rilke and I gave this 4.5 stars. Then I read Fangs by Sarah Anderson and I was wholly disappointed and I gave it 3 stars. Then I read Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery and I gave this 3 stars, or 3.5. Then I read Stargazing because it was by Jen Wang, which is the author of Princess and the Dressmaker, which is awesome. This one was kind of okay. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Death of the Heart and I DNF'd at like 30%. I gave it 3 stars because I do want to try it again sometime. I read Autobiography of Red because Emma from the channel Emmy just gushes about this book all the time, but I did not click with it and I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read For the Love of Men From Toxic to a More Mindful Masculinity by Liz Blank, and I gave that 4 stars. It was really eye-opening. I read Waves by Ingrid Chabert, and it kinda slipped my mind. I don't remember very well what it is about. I think it's about immigration. I remember I gave 4 stars. I read Woman World by Aminder Dhaliwal, and I gave that 4 stars, I think. Then Eat and Love Yourself by Sweeney Boo. I gave that 3.5 stars. Then I read Anne of Avonlea, and people are gonna be offended, but I DNF'd, and I don't think I am cut out for stories that have much description of nature. I get very bored very easily, so I'm sorry, Anne. I DNF'd, and I think I gave it like 2 stars. Then I read The Arrival by Sean Tan, and I gave that 5 stars. It's a graphic novel with no words, and it's amazing. Then I read Air of Fire by Sarah J. Maas, and I gave this 5 stars. It was a reread. Then I read Under Rose-Tainted Skies by Louise Gournal, and I gave this 5 stars. I read Giant Days Volume 1 by John Allison, and I gave it 3 stars. I read Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell, and I was bored out of my mind. I think I gave it 2 stars. I read Giant Days Volume 2 by John Allison, and I gave it 3 stars. I read the 3 books that comprise Avatar Imbalance, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and I gave, I think, 3 stars to all of them. Then I read Mexican Gothic, and I was so disappointed, and I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I read Howl and Other Poems by Allen Ginsberg, and I gave this 5 stars. No, 4 stars. Words on Bathroom Walls by Julia Walton, and I gave this 4.5 stars. I love this book. Then I read Evil Eye, which is only an audiobook. You can only get it on audiobook formation, and it was fine. It wasn't mind-shattering. I gave it 3 stars. What Paintings Say, 100 Masterpieces in Detail, and I gave this 5 stars. The Dark Interval by Rainer Maria Rilke, and I gave this 4 stars. Then I read, just do a shot, as I said every time I say then I read Queen of Shadows, another reread, 5 stars. I tried reading The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, and I DNF'd really soon. I just did not click with it. I read Just Listen by Sarah Dessen, and I gave it 3 stars. I read Elephants Can Remember by Agatha Christie, and I gave it 3 stars. Rilke's Book of Hours, Love Poems to God by Rainer Maria Rilke, and I gave this 4.5 stars. I read Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke, and I gave that 3.5 stars, I think. Then I read Anya's Ghost, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I read Glass Town by Isabel Greenberg, and it's amazing, and I gave it 5 stars. And I read Devil's Cub by Georgette Hare, and it was really good. I'm not sure if I gave it 4.5 or 5 stars. Then I read In Real Life by Cory Doctorow, and I gave it 3 stars. I read My Brother's Husband Volume 1 by Gengoro Tagami, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And I also read My Brother's Husband Volume 2, and I gave it 4.5 stars. I read Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur, and I gave that 2.5 stars. I read Devotions by Mary Oliver, and I gave that 3.5 stars. I read Heartstopper Volume 2, and I gave that 4 stars. I read Nimona by Noelle Stevenson, and I think I gave it 3 stars. I read The Princess Saves Herself in This One by Amanda Lovelace, and I gave it 1 star, and I wish I could give it 0 stars. I read Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman, and I gave it 4 stars. I read The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur, and I DNF'd, and I gave it 1 star. Then I read Impulse by Ellen Hopkins, and my mania for Ellen Hopkins started, that I wanted to read every book written by her ever. I gave this 5 stars. Then I read Sheets by Brenna Thumler, and I gave that 3.5 stars. I read Book Love by Debbie Tung, and I gave this 3.5 stars. Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim, and I gave this 3.5 stars. I read As Cocadas de Cora Coralina, and I gave this 4 stars, I think. Then I read, again, a reread, Empire of Storms, and I gave it 5 stars. Then this one I read twice this year, and it's The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. 5 stars, definitely. Then I read Being the Bug by Dodie. It's a little story she wrote and put in a video, and I gave that 5 stars. Then I read The Magic Fish by Trung Le Nguyen, and I gave this 4 stars. Then I read The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson, and I gave that 4.5 stars. I read The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta, and I gave it 3 stars. I read I Used to Have a Plan, but Life Had Other Ideas by Alessandra Olanow, and I gave this 3 stars. I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I gave that 3.5 stars. I read Perfect by Ellen Hopkins, which is the second one in Impulse, and I gave this 4.5 stars. Then I read It's Not Okay to Feel Blue and Other Lies by Scarlett Curtis, and I gave this 5 stars. I read Unravel the Dusk by Elizabeth Lim, which is the second one in Spin the Dawn, and I gave that 3 stars, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig, and I gave this 4 stars. I read Hamlet by William Shakespeare, and I gave this 4.5 stars. I read the special edition lyric book by Dodie, from the album Build a Problem, and I am counting it, okay, and I give it 5 stars, and it's awesome. Then I read The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, and I gave that 3.5 stars. I read Delicates by Brenna Thumler, and it was really a lot better than Sheets, and I gave that 4 stars, I think. Nights at the Circus, which I also DNF'd at 80% because I just couldn't take it anymore, and I gave this 2 stars, I think. And finally, number 100, I read Hamnet. This is a copy in Portuguese, and it was... I don't see what the fuss is all about. You know what I mean? It's a good story, and I gave it 4 stars. So there you go. These are all the books I read so far this year. It's August the 12th, and I've read 100 books. Let's see how many more I can read, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.